Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, today I'm going to be using my acrylic paints as watercolors. Now, there are several benefits to using this. Now, with usual watercolors, they will dry back a little bit when you have let them dry. You walk away and you come back and they'll be a little bit lighter and a little bit more dull than when you put them on. Whereas using acrylics and diluting them with some water, you are going to get that look is going to stay. It's going to be true to their color even when it is nice and dried. There are a couple of other things as well, particularly that you can layer these up. So once you put a little wash of acrylic over your page and then let it dry, you can layer these up without getting a muddy look because the color from underneath will not rehydrate. Acrylic is permanent when dry, so you can layer these up without getting any type of muddy look, whereas some watercolors will rehydrate when you add anything damp or moist or liquid, and then that can be a little bit tricky around getting muddy looks. But anyhow, there are so many good ways, and I am leaning towards using my acrylic paints right now. These are the Dina Wakley acrylic paints. I love the consistency of these. I love the colors available, and here I am just diluting these down with a lot of water. I have a little cup of water up there, and I just put down a few colors, and I'm doing a few backgrounds at a time, and really just trying to be completely random, completely sporadic around what I wanted to do. I used some, I think it's Tangerine, I used some blushing color, I used the Blackberry is the purple one, and Night is the little tiny bit of blue that I put up there. Now this color in general, when you put this on thick, is actually almost a black. I love this color, I love her ink, I love the paint of this color, and this can be a very, very dark color. So I wasn't sure how this was going to look, but I love this diluted down. It's kind of a gray blue. I love it. It's really, really different when it's been diluted down with water. So I'm keeping these completely random. There is no rhyme, no reason. I don't have stamps or dies or anything that I think I'm going to use already in mind. I decided for this one that instead of just doing one color, I would do the yellow, the orange, and then the pink. Now the yellow there is actually the Dilutions color. It is, now you can use any acrylics for this at all. I'm just letting you know that the Dina Wakley ones, for me, you see how I store them in that little container at the very, very beginning. That is all of my acrylic paints. That's all of my paints actually, full stop. And I just love that the size bottle that they come in, the bottles are lasting forever. When you dilute the color down, it goes so far. They're highly pigmented. So this is all good things for me when it comes to using these acrylics. Now at this point, I didn't want to waste the paint. So at the moment, I still have the blobs of full strength color. So I'm just going through each one of the blobs, adding water, making sure there is no full strength paint there. And then I figured I may as well dip some paper into this because I have the paint. I had already done enough backgrounds for well and truly for what I was going to need. So I'm going to dilute all of these out, and they're just as they were as I put them down on my craft mat, and I hadn't planned to do this, so they weren't strategic, but I'm just going to dip down some watercolor paper. Now this is the Holtz watercolor paper, my absolute favorite and the only one that I use, and this looks pretty good. I quite like this. I quite like how the colors have blended. There's no real mud. And then I just needed a little bit more spreading out of that color there, but I didn't want to re-dip it, so I just used my paintbrush and a little bit of water to shift the color around. I am going to use a little paper towel to dab up some of the extra pooling bits there on the side, or anything that I think is going to dry a little bit funny. You do have to be careful because the purple and the orange mixing had potential to make mud, but they didn't, and I think this looks pretty good. So here are some of the backgrounds that I created. I did do a few splatters and splashes, and I did that all at the same time as I created them. These are the background that I splashed, that I did at the end. This one here reminds me of a bug, and if I get creative, I feel like if I took a black pen to that one and doodled on it, then I could have a really fun looking cute little monster or bug there. But these backgrounds at the moment look pretty plain, but really easy to achieve and very random at this point. So when I was thinking which ones I'm going to create with, this is why I'm moving them all around, thinking I'll use these ones, I'll use these ones, and I finally settled. I'm going to show you 3 finished cards today. Now this is the mini wings from scrapbook.com. This is the Woodware collection and I absolutely love these stamps. Now I always have a mask, I always save my masks, and the reason that I can reuse them for so long is because this is the Gina K Masking Magic masking paper, and this is fabulous. This will go on forever. So all I do when I'm finished is pop it back on the background and I pop it back into the back of my stamp, and then that way it's there for next time I need it as well. Now I'm going to pop a little bit of clear embossing powder over my stamping. I stamped in some VersaFine Onyx black ink, so it's a pigment ink and it's going to stay wet. Even though we put the mask over top, it is staying perfectly wet for us to add the embossing powder to. Now I have the acrylics out, so I'm going to stick with this because I can watercolor images with this too. Now obviously this watercoloring is nothing technical, that's not my style, I don't have the talent for that, but I'm just going to go darker and more concentrated towards the center of the wings, and then as we go further out I'm just going to keep it kind of into a much lighter wash and dilute it down with more water. Now when I am going over top of the orange in the background, I have chosen to go with colors that aren't going to, for example, I'm not sure that I would have put a blue over top of the orange because blue and orange together are going to make mud, and I just wasn't sure of the results and I didn't feel like marking this one up. I really like this little background and I had a plan for it in my head, so I'm going to stick with colors that are going to work well with the orange in the background. So it's actually the exact same orange on the middle butterfly, and then the blushing color up the top, and then the yellow down the bottom, and I think this looks pretty cute. So I will put this one aside to dry and work on the next one. Now I decided to go with this one, even though this wasn't the original plan. I really like this background that we've created. Now it is quite bright and there's a lot of colors going on, so I want to turn this into something. I'm going to use the Scented Blooms stamp. This is the Woodware collection one, and these are absolutely gorgeous. They have a low price point. I love all of these. There's actually a lot of this kind of similar style, I guess, just the floral arrangements, and these are absolutely stunning. There are lots of them. If you've watched my channel, you'll know that I'm a big fan of them. So I've stamped this one in some VersaFine Onyx black ink. Again, I'm going to add over the clear embossing powder, and this just means also that I know that the ink won't smudge or run for sure, even if I've heat set it. It just guarantees another mishap won't happen along the way, and I like to make my chances the best that I can along the way. Now I saved the colour, so I carefully shift this back in because at this point there's quite a bit of water on here, and you can see how the colours kind of start at the yellow down the bottom, then the orange to the pink to the purple. So I did need to add a tiny little bit of purple up here, but what I'm going to do is basically add more of the same colour on top, if that makes sense. So the bottom flower here is kind of half yellow, half orange. So on top of the orange I'm putting orange, and on top of the yellow I put yellow. And then for the next flower up we move up, and so I'm going to use some of the blushing and the red on top of the pink, and then some of the orange on top of the orange, and again keep moving up until we end up with some of the purple on top of the purple. I'm still diluting these colors down a lot, and also this is going to help them move around really well, and I'm getting lighter as we go further out towards the edges of the petals. I'm going to leave the leaves. I don't need to have green on top of those. I didn't really want to go down that road for this one. I just wanted the flowers to stand out a tiny bit more. So I think we've achieved that really well. Now, I always have these offcuts, always hanging around in my stash. These are perfect sentiments, so I need to make the most of them. I have the Catherine Puller, I think this is called Everyday Sentiments here. This one has been a new favourite. I do love a good stamp set that has lots of different occasions on it. I think that is the most useful for me. So I am just going to take a classic little happy birthday, making sure it fits on one of those strips, stamping it in the same black ink that I stamped the outline with, stamp it down. Now I'm actually going to use a punch. Now this is the only punch that I have in my entire stash, and it is a banner punch. Of course you can create this with scissors. This was just out because the kids had been playing with it, and so I'm just going to feed this in backwards so I can line it up and then punch it down, and we have a gorgeous little flag there. Of course you can definitely create that with scissors easily. Now I am going to trim this down. You know, if you've watched my channel, that I am a fan of the border, and because there is so much colour around this one, it is going to stand off our page too. Now whilst I'm cutting things down, I may as well do this one as well. Now I decided to kind of make these butterflies a bit of a feature, so I'm actually going to cut a strip down here, and I want some of the wings to be hanging off the edge. So I'm just kind of using my trimmer to trim in between the butterflies, and then when I'm getting close I stop, and I'm going to cut around the wings with my cutter bee scissors, little fine tip scissors, and then I think this just adds a little bit of extra oomph to the background and to the card that we are creating. Now at this point I was kind of full of ideas and I wanted to do a whole lot of this version of card, but I absolutely love how this one turned out, and all of these cards turned out a little bit different even though we've basically used the same techniques on all of them. So for the first one, I'm just going to use some double-sided adhesive, do my usual tricks so that I can get this lined up perfectly. Anything that I have watercolored on, I tend to use double-sided adhesive on the back, and that means I'm going to get a really good adhesion. There's going to be no buckling, and it gets rid of any warping that you may if you've used a heat gun. I didn't have any warping this time because I didn't use heat gun. I had enough time for these things to dry in between, but often I will have to use a heat gun, and that can be a little bit of a result. So using double-sided tape usually gets rid of that for me. And then this one is just gorgeous, really simple. We're going to add a couple more things to all of these cards. They're not finished, but I'm doing these kind of assembly style at the moment. Now, a couple of pieces of double-sided adhesive down the sides of these one, and then of course my favorite, lace. This is actual lace, and you could also use a die cut though. Any little die cuts, edge or trim that you can have peeking out of the edges, I think is just going to add that extra little bit for this, and I really love the look of this. When I turn it over and put it against my desk, I think this is exactly what this little bit of card needed. It's a really delicate card, and this is for someone, I was planning to do a get well card for a friend of mine, so I was wanting these gorgeous delicate little finishing touches on this card that I know she would appreciate. Now this is again a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base, and I'm popping it down to the left hand side so that I have enough room to pop my sentiment. I'm actually going to use some Morning Mist VersaFine Clear ink. This is going to stamp beautifully because it's a pigment ink, but it's just not going to be quite as forceful as the black ink would be here. Now I get a really good impression even though I popped the butterflies up on foam, and I think that we've got a few more things to do to some of these cards, including adding some of the Stardust pen. This is the Jelly Roll Stardust, and it adds this gorgeous kind of clear shimmer, but very, very sparkly, more so than the glitter brush pens that you can get. It's kind of, you have to catch it in the right light and it just shines. It's really, really nice. With the heat embossing, that also is a bit shiny, so it's kind of a little bit less on these butterflies, but nonetheless I still think it's gorgeous. Then, just as I said, for added finishing touches, I'm going to add some white Nuvo drops just in the little decorative bits around the outsides of the butterflies. Now I am able to kind of just pop little bits here, and so this is going to give a tiny bit of raised dimension. Although it's a little bit hard to see, it also keeps those spots nice and white and helps them stand out on the butterfly, but I think they're probably easier to see in real life than they are here on the card. Now it's a little bit hard, but you can catch some of the shimmer from the pen, some from the heat embossing, and then you can see those little bits of Nuvo drops too. So this card was really fun to create, and I love how this one turned out. Now we're going to move back to the other one just for, as I said, some finishing touches. Now I'm going to add some glossy accents only to the insides of these flowers. I don't want to take away from the background that we have created, and so I did think the only other thing I would add is a little bit of clear glitter. Now I'm going to add this, sprinkle just a gentle little piece on top of the wet glossy accents, and it kind of almost sinks into it. It actually ends up kind of sinking to the bottom and then creating this kind of dome, clear dome on top. So I really love this look, and I just have a tiny little bit sprinkled. As I said, I don't want to take away from the background, but I do want to have those added little extra finishing touches. And then I also actually went ahead and made another card. I didn't do this one on film because it's easy enough to see what I did, but I used the actual background stamp as the mixed stem from the Woodware craft collection, and then the thank you is just from the All the Thanks mini clear stamp, and that's from Paper Rose. And so I've just popped this up, gave it a little border, and I think this is really, really simple. I stamped this in that same Morning Mist, so it's not quite black, not quite as dark, but yeah, I just really love it. So that's the mixed stem stamp there, and then the thank you one that I used to create this one, and I think this one turned out gorgeous too. As I said, all of these cards turned out really different, except for we used pretty much the same techniques on most of these. So this one here is a little bit brighter, and then this one here goes back to being kind of in between the two, and the one on the right is probably the softest of all three. So let me know which one is your favorite, or if you've used acrylics as watercolors. And then other than that, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you then. Bye!